It is the building which symbolises Australia's pioneering role in the Antarctic. The building which provided refuge for the sole survivor of one of Australia's greatest stories of survival. It is Mawsons Hut, the feature for this episode of Travel Oz. Hello, I'm Grainger.
It's withstood a century of being blasted by the strongest coastal winds on Earth. In the home of the blizzard, Mawsons Hut is still packed with relics from one of Australia's most outstanding expeditions. We visit Mawsons Hut with his great-granddaughter and travel in with a team who'll restore and preserve this historic building. Ahead, Mawsons Hut and the Adelie penguins who live around it. Also in this edition, tropical North Queensland. The two Tims explore Cairns and the Atherton Tablelands. And the dolphins of Bunbury, Western Australia. They're wild, they're boisterous, and yet they swim ever so close to visitors.
Getting ashore in the Antarctic can be an extremely difficult task. There are these formidable ice cliffs that stretch for hundreds of kilometres, and they're broken only occasionally by rocky outcrops like this. Now, wildlife like these Adelie penguins seek refuge here. So too did Douglas Mawson at the start of his Australian expedition back in 1912.
We are coming ashore at exactly the same point the Mawson team did, Cape Denison in Commonwealth Bay. Ahead of us, the birthplace of Australia's Antarctic heritage. Mawson and his men made not only one of the last great voyages of the heroic era, but also by far the most successful in scientific terms. There ahead of us, close to the shoreline, Mawsons Hut, still standing strong 100 years after it was erected. The Mawson team had these buildings of Oregon and Baltic pine made in Sydney, then assembled them here.
When Mawson and his men sailed into here at Boat Harbour in January 1912, it was important that they quickly built accommodation. And this they did in this prefabricated hut, erecting it for 18 men in just 10 days.
What a special experience it is to step inside Mawsons Hut. Untouched, frozen in ice and in time, is the living and working quarters of the Mawson men. Ice has begun to build up on the floor, but otherwise the building and its contents are almost exactly as they were left 100 years ago. This all gives a very clear idea of how life was for Mawson and his men for the 2 years they spent here. Showing us the finer details of Mawsons Hut today is the archaeologist Dr. Estelle Laser.
Estelle, such a confined space for 18 men to live and sleep. They slept around the walls and they ate here and worked here.
Yes, it's a really small space when you consider that they had huge amounts of clothing, all their work materials, all their cooking materials, so it would have been incredibly cramped.
They would have slept round the walls. The bunks are all around the walls around us, 18 bunks.
Yes, and they also had their lighting system was acetylene, so they would have had tubing everywhere. It would have been just astonishingly packed space.
And it's a museum. They've left things behind, little artefacts all over the shelves here.
Yes, they left quite a great deal of material behind.
And all this food here, brought by the second consignment from Captain Davis.
The number of men in the hut reduced quite dramatically from 18 to 7 in the second year. Well, they remodelled a few of the bunks and turned them into storage areas so they didn't have to go outside in the cold to get provisions all the time.
And for such a relatively small room, and even tinier room, the dark room for the photographer, Frank Hurley.
Yes, it's like a little broom cupboard. It's amazing that he was able to work in there at all. But he didn't just do photography there. They actually designed entertainments for the other men, which are of course very important for morale in the long winter.
And he made movies.
Yes, he did. That was one of the most important contributions he made. He made a film which is now known as Home of the Blizzard, And it's an iconic film which gives us a very good indication of how they lived and worked in this incredibly difficult environment.
Mawson's own room, his own inner sanctum.
Yes, unlike all the other men, he had his own separate cubicle, so he had a little space to himself, but he could still look out and keep an eye on the men.
Bunk here,
He did, a little chair, and
shelves all around.
and pictures on the wall, so they're like drawing room prints to colour up the room. Some of them are quite well known. There's an 18th century painting, Fragonard's Girl on a Swing there. He did have a picture of Paquita, but his fiancée, but that was really important to him. He brought that back home with him.
The bunks that line Mawsons Hut include those of Dr. Xavier Mertz and Lieutenant Belgrave Ninnis, the two men who died on a sledging journey, leaving Mawson to walk for a month, starving and alone. He lived on the flesh of his sledge dogs, making his way back to Cape Denison, only to see his ship departing in the distance. Visiting the hut for the first time in her life is Mawson's great-granddaughter, Emma McEwen. Emma is the first woman in the Mawson family to visit the hut.
I was taken by surprise. I felt even more emotional about the whole experience than I expected. It's kind of strange doing it this way around, in a way. It would have been easier if I'd seen it before writing the book. It's strange writing about something that you haven't seen, but it's wonderful now to get a sense of the scale of the hut and get a sense of where everything is in relation to the hut here too at Commonwealth Bay.
And going into Mawson's special room, how was that?
Well, I felt there was a lot of atmosphere in there really, and yeah, that was amazing. I spent a bit of time just standing in there and just taking it all in.
How powerful is the feeling about what you're now seeing?
It's indescribable, it really is. I feel very lucky and very relieved to be here because it's a difficult place to get to, and you never know whether you're actually going to make it. So yeah, it's amazing.